You know how songs have a best part? Don't you just want a song that's like all the best parts?
I had a joke at the beginning of this video about putting the best parts of a bunch of songs together and then me dancing through them. But I got hit for copyright infringement on YouTube. So now you just have to watch it with some boring, unrelated, free licensed music going in the background, and bonus points if you can guess which songs we're actually playing.
Yeah. Too bad that song doesn't exist. Question 18. So we roll right along into the 18th question, and really this dawning realization of what sin does to us leaves us in a place of need. And there's one last ditch Hail Mary effort before we get to the conclusions of, well, maybe we don't have to be punished for our sin. And that's where we find ourselves in question 18. Question: will God allow our disobedience and idolatry to go unpunished? Answer: no. Every sin is against the sovereignty, holiness, and goodness of God, and against His righteous law. And God is righteously angry with our sins and will punish them in His just judgment, both in this life and in the life to come. So you hear there in question 18 this final attempt. Well, does every sin have to be punished? Perhaps for those people who are really, really good, who maybe the scales of their good outweighs the scale of their bad. Maybe those people, God can overlook them. And the response comes back clearly and pointedly: absolutely not. All sin is an offense to God. You see in the text that the Catechism chose there in Ephesians 5, starting in verse 5 and running through verse 6, Paul writes this: "For you may be sure of this, that everyone who is sexually immoral or impure, or who is covetous, that is, an idolater, who has no inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and God. Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of these things the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. All of those who are breakers of the law will find punishment for their deeds." This is that great issue that we find in Romans chapter 3. How can God be just and let sins go unpunished? And we'd be jumping ahead if we were to continue with Romans, the line of thinking in Romans 3, that finds the resolution to that tension, the crisis in the heavenlies of a just God who is not punishing sin. It is just nonsensical for those two things together. Let me read it to you in the words of Charles Spurgeon in the book that I forgot over there. One second. This one. The devotional, which is just a couple of commentaries that correspond to the question and answer. And Spurgeon says this: "Not to punish the guilty were to exact the penalty of suffering from the innocent. Think what an injury and injustice would be inflicted upon all honest men in London if thieves were never punished for their roguery. It would be making the innocent suffer if you allowed the guilty to escape. God, therefore, not out of arbitrary choice, but from the very necessity of rightness, must punish us for having done wrong. So we stand in a very, very difficult place. There is no ability for a righteous and just God to allow unrighteousness to go unpunished. Those two things are nonsensical. That's a circle with corners. It just doesn't make sense. To have one means you don't have the other. And God, as a just God, must also be a punishing God. You cannot imagine how unjust it would be to have a judge sit at the bench and have a guilty party who is clearly caught in evil behavior stand in front of him and him to say, you know what, I'm just going to let you go on this one. It's nonsensical. It would break your heart, especially the closer to you that offense may be. And so God, as a righteous and just God, and sin, as vile and repugnant as it is, must be punished. There is no escape from this. Your sin, my sin, will find punishment. It will receive the wrath of God that it must receive. It's not an option. If it didn't, then God would not be a just God. He would be something less than worthy of our worship. For God to not be a God who rightfully pours out justice upon wrongdoing means that he is slanted, favored, biased. In other words, he's not God. He's no longer righteous. He is no longer just. He is unworthy of our worship at that level. And our God is the opposite of that. All sin will be dealt with. It just leaves you on that cliffhanger of, well, then how, right? What can be done? How can God be just and one who justifies? One who is able to condemn, but also able to freely let you into right relationship with him. And the next two questions, really three questions, are going to get at that specifically. So you're just going to have to stick with. In the meantime, what are we to do? How in the world are we to apply this truth of God and his justice that refuses to allow sin to go unpunished? Just one suggestion for you here, and it's really in line with what I've been trying to push you towards through these last 4 or 5 questions here in the Catechism. As we've been looking at sin, taking account of what we are doing, we must also realize, so this is the applicational point, realize how offensive your sin is to God. Realize how offensive your sin is to God. This is not just something that you struggle with at a personal level. This is an affront, an assault on the actual creator of the universe and the Lord which you worship. Your sin is egregiously offensive. It would be like going into someone's home and breaking all of the house rules that they have asked you not to break. You're a guest there. Abide by the rules that are given to you. And you and I are created guests in the world of God, and yet we are continually putting our shoes on the proverbial couch. We refuse to listen, and we have to realize, take whatever taboo, whatever house rule, whatever thing that bothers you the most, and picture the person who loves you the most, continually, repeatedly transgressing that thing. And that is how we should think about our sin. It is that thing that gets under your skin. It is most vile, most frustrating on repeat over and over and over again. Our sin is offensive, first and foremost, to God. Will God allow our disobedience and idolatry to go unpunished? No. Every sin is against the sovereignty, holiness, and goodness of God. and against his righteous law. And God is righteously angry with our sins and will punish them in his just judgment, both in this life and in the life to come.